Good morning, darlings. Get ready with me while I also tell you about my favorite podcasts that I like to listen to. My face is already fresh and clean. I'm gonna do some light makeup, some very light hair, and get dressed and get out the door. So enjoy. I just need to finish eating first. I thought today, let's take a look at some of my favorite podcasts. Now, I have a whole list, a whole Rolodex of podcasts that I love to enjoy on a weekly basis, but I had to crack it down to my top 5, the top 5 that I have to listen to all the time. And my hope is that you hear about one of these, you want to try it out, you end up being a fan in the end, just like me. All right, let's get into it. We're going to start off strong. First show is called Girls Next Level. Now, you may have heard of the TV show from the early 2000s, Girls Next Door. Yes, this is the Playboy Girls Next Door rewatch podcast. Now, Girls Next Door was insanely popular, and if you do go back and watch it, it really encapsulates the early 2000s. As someone who used to work for Playboy and didn't have the best time of her life, this is my Roman Empire. I think about this all the time, and I always knew that these girls had more to tell. Today, those girls are no longer girls. They are fully formed, full-fledged women with children, and they are ready to tell their story of their truth in the Playboy Mansion. And y'all, it gets juicy. In the first 3 episodes alone, these girls detail what it was like being with Hugh Hefner and what it was like in the bedroom. Now, this is a really big deal, okay? For years, these women have denied and evaded questioning about what happened in the bedroom with Hugh Hefner. Well, honey, they open the door wide open with this podcast. In the first 3 episodes, they go in. The specific episode that I'm talking about is episode 2, In the Bedroom. And you know what? Some of it is a hard listen, but if you are a fan of the show, if you've ever had questions about what was really happening with that relationship, with that dynamic, they answer everything. It's absolutely unheard of. Outside of those 3 episodes, the entire podcast is a rewatch podcast, so you can follow along by watching Girls Next Door. I have found it on Amazon Prime, and it's kind of a fun throwback, easy, cheesy la to watch. But what I love is how these girls, they're historians, okay? They will break down a scene and say, I didn't say that, I did say that. The editors spliced that together. I have pictures of things that they didn't show you guys, and this is what the drama was when no one was looking. They break it all down. And I love it. I'm absolutely here for it. So if you haven't started listening to Girls Next Level, you need to. Up next on my favorite podcast, I have Trevor Noah's What Now? Now, Trevor has one of those super comforting voices that I could listen to him talk for hours. I would actually love to listen to him talk for hours. If you don't know, Trevor Noah is a South African comedian, but he used to be the host of The Daily Show on Comedy Central. Outside of touring, this is one of Trevor's first big projects since quitting The Daily Show. When Trevor Noah quit The Daily Show, it was a huge deal. And the biggest part of that was actually he didn't tell anyone he was going to do it. He actually quit live on air, and people thought, is this a joke? Is this real? There were so many questions about that. But since then, he's transitioned out of it and started his tour, and he's also doing this podcast. And I think poignantly has decided to call it What Now? Now, if you're looking for all the details of why he quit and what was really happening, he has kind of skirted around it and he hasn't been answering that. But this podcast is amazing. Personally, I think that he is one of the greatest thinkers of our time, and he has very funny friends. And I think that is the magic of this podcast. Although he does have celebrity guests come on, one of my favorite episodes being him and Kevin Hart. But when he doesn't have guests, they just talk about the world. You know those really awesome summers we used to have where we would be in the backyard with our friends, sitting around a table, no school, no responsibilities, and we're just talking about our hopes and dreams, what we think it's going to be like to be an adult. He has encapsulated this feeling, and it brings so much joy to my heart. 2 good episodes that are great for you to start with are Kevin Hart and Trevor Noah from What Now, and Idris Elba and Trevor Noah on What Now. Those are so good. So good. Next up, I might be throwing you a bit of a curveball here, but stick with me. I promise you're gonna love it. 4 words for you: strippers in the attic. This podcast started over the pandemic, and it was about 2 out-of-work strippers, one from America and one from the UK. They've known each other for a very long time. They've stripped all across America and the UK together, and their stories are some of the most insane, ridiculous stories I've ever heard. Personally, I have always felt that strippers are some of the most open people on this earth. I mean, how could you not be? You have to be so in tune with your body and in tune with the audience in a way that I think actors think they're doing, but strippers know they are doing. It's a level of openness I have yet to reach in my career, but you never know. These 2 girls have an amazing time retelling their stories, and like I said, it started during the pandemic when they weren't working, when it was unsafe for strip clubs to be open. Something I really love about this podcast is you can tell they are actually friends. They are going to be friends until no one wants to see them strip anymore because they're going to be wrinkly old ladies, but they will still be friends. A great episode to start with is Strippers in the Attic, Client Types, the 3 W's. And I love the way that they break this down. They're talking about the clients and clientele that you'll find at the strip club, literally any strip club, and I believe them. The 3 W's are whales, women, and weirdos. I won't spoil it for you, but I can promise you that their descriptions are on point. I really need you to give it a try. Get into this podcast because I feel more liberated just listening to them, and I know you will too. If you haven't got enough female empowerment yet, I'm going to hit you with another. This next podcast is Chelsea Handler's podcast, Dear Chelsea. Now, before this, it was called Life Will Be the Death of Me, which was one of her book titles, I believe. You know, I wasn't actually a huge Chelsea Handler fan until Chelsea started going to therapy. And that might sound harsh, but even she admits that she's a completely different person after starting therapy. If you listen back to some of her very old episodes, you can see the change in her that's happening. On her show today, people can call in, they can write in, they can give those really gut-wrenching questions or needing for advice or needing a suggestion, and it's so interesting to hear what Chelsea is going to give them in her funny, no bullshit kind of way. And they also bring on different specialists and celebrities to help out. One of my favorites is actually when she brought on Martha Stewart. Now, I've met Martha, and she is a character. But in this episode, I feel like Martha wasn't ready for what these people were going to be questioning Chelsea about. Because at one point, Martha turns to Chelsea and is like, wow, they really give it to you, don't they? In that really weird Martha voice that she has. Martha could not do a show like this on her own, and you can tell there's like some push and pull about giving advice. Martha's like, get over it. But Chelsea actually is very thoughtful in the way that she gives advice to people, and you never know, you yourself might want to ask Chelsea a question one day. Oh, and Martha mark my words, you've heard it here first. I believe that Chelsea Handler's new book is going to be about manifesting and spirituality because of the way that she kind of is ingraining this into all of her questions, but also because the world is changing. I really think that that is the lane that she is about to go down. All right, and lastly, I put this podcast at the end because I think this podcast could make podcasts about some of the other podcasts that I just mentioned. How many times did I just say podcast? This podcast is called Sounds Like a Cult. They self-identify as a podcast about the modern day cults we all follow. They've done episodes on the cult of weddings, the cult of Disney adults, the cult of Trader Joe's, and I truly think they could make a podcast on the cult following of Trevor Noah or the cult following of fans of Playboy, because if you've ever been inside of a Reddit thread about Playboy, it is insane. Basically, they take things that we fanaticize and break it down and ask the question, is this a cult? They have also done episodes on some of the cults that I follow, like the cult of veganism or the cult of astrology. Now, the astrology one really did call me out, but I love the relatability of their podcast because they touch on topics that affect all of us. Now, here's some tea. Sounds Like a Cult actually used to be two girls talking about culty things, and recently in the last year and a half there was a lawsuit between the two of them for hostile work environment, for money. It was a huge scandal. Needless to say, the two girls separated and it's just one girl hosting now, but you can tell she was obviously the driving force behind the podcast because the episodes have kept going and literally without missing a beat. So good for her for keeping it going, and good for you because more episodes are out weekly and you can catch Sounds Like a Cult. Alrighty, darlings, I hope you picked up on at least one show that you'd be interested in hearing. I hope you learned a little bit about me, and I want to thank you for being along for this standalone episode. I'll be back soon with something new and exciting. For now, go outside and touch grass or something. You probably need it. It's your girl Sid. Bye-bye.